Welcome to the Pulse Wave. I'm Virgil Virga, your host, brought to you by Metronome. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of the Pulse Wave. All right, well, let's get into it. So this week we start strong with Andral, and they just scored a $6 billion virtual wall contract in the big, beautiful bill. It's very narrowly written, so it locks them in as essentially the only supplier for a few things. And that's not just because they're lucky. That's edge computing at tactical scale, operating when satellites drop out or connectivity fails. That's what the Air Force grade tech needs when it's deployed in the wild. Now, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of other startups that look amazing on paper. They have awesome slide decks. Maybe they have a viral demo. Maybe they have a mission statement that would make us all blush. But are they the real deal, or are they just PowerPoint illusions? Because if perception gets all the headlines, but payload never arrives, that's how we end up with high-cost failures like, well, put in your high-cost failure right there. And if your pitch deck is bigger than your product, maybe you're just spinning and you're diluting the mission. So let's go. First, we've got a guy who's got a lot of hair and he's got a lot of opinions. He's the co-founder and president of Mount Indy. Welcome back, Tommy Weinert. We've got a guy with 4 eyes and at least 4 opinions for every topic. Welcome to the show, Rob Murtha. And also joining us, he is the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Studies and Analysis. He is not the monster hiding under your bed. He is an edge monster. Michael Henry, thank you so much for joining us. Appreciate it. So the first segment is luck or payload. So I'm going to share my screen. So as you see here, here's an article from The Intercept, and it starts out by saying Andral Industries is a major beneficiary of the bill. It includes a section that essentially grants monopoly. It goes on and on. You can imagine what the rest of this article says, and I'm going to get to my point here for a second. It's not essentially, rainbows in this article for Andral. So if you just read this article, you would think that they're a bunch of vaporware, right? And then if you did just a little bit of research, now listen, I am probably a little bit biased. I'm sort of a fanboy of this company and what they've done. But if you look at some of the things that they've done in terms of their surveillance towers, Customs and Border Patrol said that the development of these towers has reallocated thousands of hours to Border Patrol agents' time, directly contributing to saving lives and preventing illicit drug entry. Their Thunderdome Cyber Phase 3 contract, it focuses on rapid prototyping of AI-driven defense technologies, enhancing the military's ability to respond swiftly and effectively to emerging threats, thereby contributing to operational success and mission success. I could go on, there's a lot of these. So this is what I'm getting at. I'm curious. I'm gonna go to you first, Michael. How do you distinguish as a customer between, is this a real product or is this not? Is this gonna work at scale? And I love this quote.
So a lot of my development has been in the van. You see in the middle of the street.
This is it.
That was a shot. It was like 2 a.m. I was still programming. Really, the edge is something that you have to understand and live in order to be able to afford it.
All right. So you saying that, being on the edge, knowing what works, how do you distinguish, and especially some people maybe who haven't been on the edge and some other customers? Now I'll let you answer. I'm done talking.
Yeah, for sure. I really enjoy listening to myself on the stage while also in an internet broadcast panel discussion. It's really great getting to hear myself talk. It's like one of the things you never want to do. But I do think it's a message that needs to be shared, is that traditionally we have vendors where we have like these demonstrations and it's all in the can and they've tested it 80 times before they show up, and then they show up and they're like, boom, rabbit out of the box, like it's gonna work with an average user that's gonna be able to land, flip their little flip book, get this like approach to like, oh, I have to turn it on this way, got it, understood. All conditions being perfect, these quote unquote experiments or exercises, they they in fact often are pretty hard to deliver on. And most of the exercises I've gone to, it's sort of a show up, figure it out, spend a few days, try to figure that out. Really, most of the time the government takes their word for it. And honestly, I'm of a different religion. I believe that you actually have to show up, prove it, prototype it, show me it running under the hood, show me what's pre-canned and what's not, and then really be honest about the technological capability. I mean, if you throw enough money at something, then I can guarantee you that you're going to continue to throw enough money at it. There's no guarantee that it's actually going to be something that's like ready to go for the persistent future. And I definitely think that there's like there's this stasis or parasitic drag in the system that if you don't put a ton of energy into doing the differentiated lifting and the hard work, then in fact it just slows down. It's this law of atrophy that these vendors, they say they're going to throw a couple $1 billion against something and it's going to be like voila there. No, they're going to throw a couple billion. They're going to ask you to throw a couple $1 billion so that way you could throw $10 billion later, $20 billion later. And honestly, I don't think that traditionally the government has had a really good lens on deterministic test and evaluation. And those of us that are in the field are bearing the scars of bad integration for decades. And so you look at military gear relative to commercial gear, and it makes you think about, is it commercial military gear or is it actually commercial gear? Just like going to REI and buying a backpack, then go look at your government-issued backpack, the one with the big plastic thing on your back that causes horrible scars and blisters, and you go down to REI for like $300 and buy a really good backpack that you can walk for 1,000 miles with, and will you be exhausted? Will your body be beaten down? Yes. You just walked 1,000 miles, but you didn't have to walk 1,000 miles with a piece of gear that was poorly thought out and inadequately tested in the field. So,
Rob, you shook your head. Something resonated when Michael said testing and evaluation during that period. What was it that resonated with you?
Virgil, I'm big on this topic. So does everybody on this call. Michael, you and I riff about it a lot, but it's really like this philosophical challenge I think the DoD and other government agencies have around how do you kind of test something thoroughly enough, and then how do you also introduce some self-awareness where you're never going to be able to test every variable, every situation, every single thing, but bake in that resilience, bake in that modularity, and it goes back to what Michael kind of started with, where a lot of our T&E events are historically, not the super recent ones, but historically they've been very performative. We've had this weird lull where it's been 25 years of we've had better tech than everyone. We've just been this force to be reckoned with. And so we've been just oh yeah, let's go to the fun kind of test and evaluation event. Let's have this exercise event, and we'll all look forward to the Friday where we crack beers, which is wonderful. But the hot wash data, where did that end up? Where did all of these interesting little signals that surface during these different exercises, whether they've been ground, sea, air, space, etc., where did all of that end up to constantly munge and reflect on and adapt and change, and really introduce tactical science into the way that we kind of manage our expectations and feel confident in things, and then tie that to how we release capital. I think that whole flywheel is so important. And being a UXer, right? A formal kind of segment of UX or a bigger picture version of UX is some type of vertical within test and evaluation, right? And so that's why I'm just so biased to doing that in a way that encompasses a lot of different scenarios, manages risk effectively, but is also extremely kind of relevant and kind of dependable. So anyway, that's kind of how I feel about it. What were you thinking, Virgil? Anything stand out to you?
I'm curious. I want to hit it from a different angle when I ask Tom a question. So, Tom, you've helped build a lot of these startups that we all know. You've helped us grow, as a matter of fact, helping us find real critical pieces of our company. how do you know what companies, because I think you can have a good culture for the most part and not really have something that works. How do you know, and when you're talking to companies about who you want to work with, obviously you want to work with the best ones, the one who are adding real value. What are you looking for when you say, yes, I'm going to work with this company, they seem real, they're adding real value, or am I hitching to some, again, a vaporware company that's going to make me look bad?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, for us, it comes down to connectivity to real programs. And are these, in the Beltway, you've got tons of subcontractors all fighting across the same subcontracts, with very, limited connectivity sometimes. So we really look for that is, are they connected to are they the prime, which is what we're really looking for? Do they have say in the game? And are they connected to the program? I think a lot of people would be surprised at how many companies struggle with even discussing the missions that they are attached to, at least down at the recruiting and program management level. So we really look at that as, can you define the mission that you're supporting, and are you connected to the program? And from a recruiting standpoint, because if I can't get that information from you, I'm never going to be able to hire talent into your companies, because I can't adequately explain the program or the mission. So I think if you've been in the industry for long enough, those conversations can be very quick, and you can tell very quickly, who has that connectivity and influence, I guess is a better way to put it. From a vaporware perspective, I don't think we ever get into the point where we're doing any sort of critical evaluation on companies' technology. It's more mission focused, like, are they connected to the mission, and if that makes sense.
That makes total sense, without a doubt. Michael, I'm going to go back to you. One thing Andral really did, they are one of the companies that they've helped merge Def Tech back with Silicon Valley, whatever Silicon Valley is now. Lots of money, and the way that procurement is going now, opening the kimono up to more companies, more non-traditionals. So, I'm sure you could say, hey, this is good, and then this is also the bad part. So do you want to riff on that a little bit and how that excites you, and what some of the hesitations are with a lot of new companies that maybe aren't battle tested on the edge?
Yeah, I don't think that we necessarily have a problem with the exciting things that are being brought to bear for these new emerging, as soon as you say Andral, I think drones. The Pentagon has their, drone petting zoo up in the courtyard today with all sorts of new flying, autonomous AIFI things. Really cool, right? I think part of the problem that we've traditionally suffered from is that the government has been unable to attract and retain design build engineers, because I want to go build cool things, right? Well, the government builds programs. Those aren't cool things. That's paperwork. Who wants to go build paperwork? But we really need real engineers in the government that aren't just, the Army Corps of Engineering building bridges, dams, and roads and various, causeway systems. We need to have real design build engineers step across the blue line for our service branches and are the discerning eye of what technologies we actually need, so that we have a requirements process that's not broken. And, I'm unsure if the deep fake will be the engineers writing the requirements process based upon some Hugging Face LLM model, and they just ask for some random bag of buzzwords to put into the next requirements authorization document. Or is it going to be the deep fake that these companies are trying to sell me, and that my staff doesn't have the technological background and the acumen to be able to spot the shinola from the BS?
That's what I was waiting for you to get to, which is the experience on your side to be able to sniff it out at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I think that going to exercises is huge value, but we're not doing enough of it, and we are not, as the government, as not the uniform person, but as the government, we should be sleeping in the tents with our airmen and our soldiers and our guardians, airmen and guardians. I have to say that now. And we should, no kidding, be at the exercise not to just merely observe, but to participate.
I love that. Yes, Tom, go.
So you're getting to something that I love talking about, which is, and when I talk about hiring in the government, government contract, government, it's all the same to me, right? Like whether you're going to bring someone in to build stuff as a contractor, if you're going to bring someone in as a government employee. And I think it also ties to the earlier discussion with Andral, but it's the acquisition process I've always looked at and said, this is the main thing that is preventing companies from bringing new talent into the government space, is the way that we base the labor category requirements. We're looking for people with 10 years of experience in XYZ. If not, we can't hire them into a certain labor category. And it's the thing that gets us away from skills-based hiring. Like we've heard that we want to move to more skills-based hiring in government, but from a contractor standpoint, I don't see that we can get there until we look at the acquisition process and say we no longer can base labor categories off of years of experience. We need to base it off of skills. So it's interesting that you bring that up, because my job is bringing these talented engineers into the space, and that's what we struggle with every single day. And not to mention the politicization of government too, right? Like the younger generation, they look at politics as government. They don't realize it's two separate things, and it turns them off from moving into this space. So it's good to hear you say that. I'm really passionate about that.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Like, I'm starting to riff on this new concept. And I was driving down the road the other day and saw a lifted truck. And on the back of it, it said, "Dirty hands, clean money." Right? Dirty hands, clean money. So that means to me, like, we should have this movement where, you get your hands dirty because you're doing the honest labor work of the engineering to actually build product, instead of merely observing as some sort of detached arm's length. We're just going to watch you do this thing, and I'm going to tell you what good looks like. Well, how are you going to know what good looks like if you've never done? If I'm framing a house and I know how to frame a house, then I can be a contractor, right? But if I've never framed a house, how can I observe how a house should be built?
That's a great point. Moving on. Drone dominance delivered or not delivered? Here is our secretary. Sign it, Pete. Come on. So I was curious after I watched that. Well, I saw it was a lot better when they had Enter Sandman in there. It was a lot. I made him take that out. But I was curious, like, who? I listen to a lot of geopolitical podcasts and hear about all the countries that are manufacturing drones at an alarming pace. And listen, I didn't do a ton of research, but I was curious. I didn't have enough time today. But who has the most drones? And as you see up here on the screen, currently it's saying the USA's got 13,000, and this is so believable that China's not on this list. But if you scroll down, they start talking about Russia, how they're dramatically scaling their production, which we all know they're learning a lot with this war with Ukraine. I know that they're using a lot of Iranian-built drones as well. So I said, what about China? And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. China has a shitload of drones too. And then I said, you know what? I've never seen this, but I've heard about these Chinese drone videos. If this doesn't scare the shit out of you, I have a feeling they have more than 13,000 drones in China. They probably have a bunch. I'm not going to say that. I have discerning people on this call, but So
When you used to think of drones, though, it was like Predator drones, it was Reaper, whatever, like the big, huge drones, right? And now it's like they're this big, right? Like it encompasses all of those. But yeah, it's interesting what's going on in that space.
can we do what he says we're going to do? I listen. I don't know, like you said, Shinola from anything, and I would say I'm just going to say that I don't think we have the most drones. And is the most important, or are the most lethal drones the most important? I'm curious, Michael.
Yeah. So first, I'll say this. SecDef setting the vision for where we're going to go is exciting and really, honestly, going to be something that I think is going to be a force to really be reckoned with. I don't doubt our aerospace industry in any way, shape, or form. We've always been the lead in aerospace, and that's really what this drone thing is we are asking our traditional aerospace OEMs to come up with meaningful and military-grade solutions to what has essentially been, a counterinsurgency tool to, go against Clausewitzian-style war in Ukraine. So honestly, I think that the technology that I'm seeing come out of drones from our traditionals is very good, and I'm excited to see what we will do in the small market. But keep in mind, like the small market has kind of been there for a while. If you think about it, our traditional utilities are inspecting the thousands of miles of high tension line that our national grid presents to our 375 million civilians. Excuse me. So, like, are we not already using this technology in other purposes? We're inspecting smokestacks around the United States for their safety with these drones. There's all sorts of agro uses that we are doing with these drones. And keep in mind, we've also been using them for law enforcement for quite some time too. So I don't think that we're going to be struggling to keep up in the drone race.
That's great to hear from you. Rob, I'm curious from a different angle. When you see that video with SecDef imagining that they still had Enter Sandman, what does that video do for the younger folks thinking about going into the military?
I think it's partially inspiring to see, the SecDef showcasing things and kind of highlighting something that a lot of younger people have used in video games and kind of read articles about in Ukraine, which is like one of the most polarizing modern conflicts. And yeah, I mean, and that's about it, right? I think there's a lot of different outcomes from that. I think young people are like, how do I build those things? How do I contribute to whatever it takes to build those things, right? It's not just material, it's also software and firmware and security and validation, and like the supply chains are, supply chain logistics analysis. I mean, I think it's really inspiring. And there's this level of like authenticity that you see like just in the wild, whether it's online and just people in general. I think one of the things that, kind of tying this back to an earlier conversation, one of my opinions about it when I saw it, I was like, this is really cool. I love that we're featuring tech. I love that we're highlighting American companies. But there's something that we have to do to become like the legit Legion again and become this like super capable force to be reckoned with that everyone's on a path to want to create anyway. It's not like we're not going down this path, but I think this is just like a wise approach. I think we have to separate inspiration, ambition, and marketing and kind of where we're at and what we're doing and how we're going to get there. Because I think if you start to blend the two, that's when you get like reduced expectations. You end up like delivering less, like you end up not catching up and letting programs fester that are actually struggling a lot more than they, are marketed to be struggling, right? And the only people who lose are us, or is us, and that's the one thing we're trying to avoid. And it's hard to do that well, but I think this administration is going to do a good job at that. We have to do a good job. We don't have any other kind of answers right now. I just looked at some of like so the small SUAS low cost attack drones. China produces around 500,000 to 700,000 per month, and that's what's really being used in Ukraine. And even in a lot of the kind of components that are used elsewhere, right? It's not necessarily Chinese components if they meet certain criteria, but it's like Chinese adjacent countries that have influence. They've just done such like a scary, a scary, thoughtful job at kind of spreading their tentacles around the world, and it's going to be the biggest challenge of our lifetime for sure to kind of reorient ourselves.
To counterpoint though, us nerds, we've been doing FPV racing drones going back 10 years. And that's where the technology came from. We were cobbling it together because we were part of the, hobby RC crowd that got tired of flying our helicopter upside down, and we wanted to go to something more cool that was a lot more aligned of one of the Star Wars movies. So, I think that the technology came right here at home. What they've done is they've scaled it, and it's time for us to take note of that and present a force that definitely meets and exceeds their capabilities.
Without a doubt, we got to get to work. Final segment, mocked up and monetized. So when I first read about this, so here's this new, it's called Mockly. It's a fake DM generator. It's actually user friendly. I mean, obviously you could get on any program and Figma or Photoshop and make some fake DMs, but this makes it really easy. He shipped this a couple weeks ago. I thought it was interesting because the first thing that I thought of when I saw this was Signalgate, right? So some reporter could have made a Mockly Signal DM and circulated it. Obviously, we know that's not what happened, but I was upset because I broke into your guys' Signal account and I saw that you guys were messaging earlier, and this is something that really hurts a lot. I've been working hard on this show, and for you guys to say these things about me and Signal really pisses me off. So, I mean, obviously I'm just making a funny little point here, but I'm curious, right? Listen, we all jump at the first thing that we see. I don't care if you're an analyst or not, right? I mean, if you're that first analyst that gets an OSINT feed and you see a Signal chat with my name on it, and right? So I'm curious your take on just making it, this sort of goes along with deepfakes and what we're throwing into the evil AI bucket. I'm curious your take on little things like this, and how does the Intel community battle against this? This is wild, right? At the scale?
Well, I think coming up with some deepfake signal messages isn't necessarily going to really rattle the Intel community. I think that the full motion video stuff is going to be very difficult to unpack and deal with. Honestly, we may, in our lifetimes, we will certainly see deepfake videos of various heads of state doing unspeakable things that I won't talk about on camera, but and we're gonna have to unpack that and figure out how do we deal with those situations, and sometimes the deep fakes might actually be real.
Interesting. What do I believe and I not believe? On a similar note, a couple weeks ago on this show, we were talking about how there was hundreds of North Koreans that were shadow working for defense contractors as well as large Fortune 500 companies. They were doing it, disguising their voices with AI, obviously just writing AI resumes, fake LinkedIn companies. So we did this story and we circulated it in the company, and we changed a lot of our hiring just so this wouldn't happen, our process. I walked in this morning and one of my senior recruiters calls me over. He's like, Virgil, come here. I got to show you this. He's like, we were talking about all this, what happened with the North Korean story. And there's two people that they've been communicating with, right? And they spoke to them. They thought it was a little weird. All the resumes were written in everything that I just said. And he goes, look at the company that they work for. It's called Quality IT on LinkedIn. And it says American company, but it's in UK. And then when you look who works there, there's about 15 people with names that you wouldn't assume were John or Jeff. but when you put all of that together, and he said when he was talking to them on the phone, he could tell that they were doing some type of translating. All this together, we put it together, and the person fell off the face of the earth. And we just started recording all of our phone calls at the end of last week. We missed this for a lot of reasons, but this is along the same lines of being duped. This is happening very quickly, and it's coming at us fast, and we've got to really figure this out, this whole picture. I'd love to hear Tommy's take on that.
Yeah, well, real quick too, like Mockly, like I don't understand what the use case is for that, right? Like that product other than deception.
Exactly.
And the other thing I want to say about that really quick too is the silver lining in all of this. I do believe that the collective consciousness of the world is getting smarter when it comes to this stuff. So, you know, I do believe there's some of that in there too. But to your point, yeah, so we just had a client recently come out and say, we need you to video capture the person you're speaking to. We need to see their identification. We're leaning back in on professional references, and you can't use virtual backgrounds in screen interviews. It has to be, you know, because excuse me, apparently with the virtual backgrounds, it's when they're using like an AI filter or are able to, you know, use ChatGPT easier. So this is a huge issue. It's definitely it's not as nefarious as we always think, though. It's not always like, you know, bad actors. Sometimes, not that this is good, but it's people doing overemployed stuff where they're taking 2 or 3 jobs, they're billing 3 different contracts and working 40 hours a week. That's horrible for its own reason. But the fact of the matter is this is happening a ton. And if a company like Metronome, which, you know, isn't a gigantic company, is seeing this, like just imagine what's happening at some of the large integrators. So this is a case for, you know, absolute, you know, in recruiter training, involved with security, making sure that, you know, recruiters understand they are really the first line of defense when it comes to security within the organization. So it's interesting that you saw that, but a lot of companies are feeling that right now.
Michael, you look like you want to say something.
Oh yeah, I feel like you just made a perfect segue for, I think like the next real wave in technology is going to be authenticity. Not necessarily these deep fakes, but authenticity. Verifying that specific people are doing specific things, you know, all the way down to what lines of code they've written, whether or not it was originally their line of code, or whether they were using some sort of, you know, Claude or Copilot, you know, tool to get them there, and whether or not we can attest that a specific piece of intellectual property comes from a specific human. You know, it is going to be the wave of the future. I don't want to throw the blockchain buzzword in there because, like, I don't think that's it, but I do think that there is some sort of like attestation that these are the acts you've done. You know, that used to be the university degree. The universities have kind of eroded that a bit. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you didn't cheat your way through that, right? But seriously, like providing some sort of attestation of authenticity is really going to be a huge market for what is this like digital thing that you're presenting me with? What is this resume? Did you actually do these things? How is that? Are we all going to be in SimCity trading life points? Like, oh, I worked on Tommy's project, so he gave me 5, you know, tokens, and since he was a cool manager, I gave him like 2 manager tokens, and so now he who has the most token balance is the most authentic? Maybe, but I do think that there is a real problem with not remote work, but work in general, and where did it come from, who did it, and how well does that work out? We all have been on group projects together where the loudest person in the room wasn't the most capable. It's time to get rid of that.
It's almost all the projects. To give you an idea, Tommy, I don't want to, I guess I can say this. So they checked our cyber stuff the other day, and one fella said to us, our latest report confirms the effectiveness of XYZ, our safeguarding implementation last quarter. From June 14th to July 14th, our system successfully blocked over 1,000 attempts from high-risk regions, primarily China and Russia. 3 malicious systems from Russia. Yeah, so they're coming after all of us.
Yeah, it might be
Cover.
you guys, or it might just be everybody on the internet.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it's been a great episode. Michael Henry, thank you so much for joining us. You really added a great flair to the episode. Tommy, as usual, appreciate it. Rob, thanks for nothing wherever you are.